Hey YouTube, in this video I have another episode of NC Socks. So this is the third episode. I'll leave a link to the rest of the playlist in the description below where you can see all three so far, which are quite a few, as I'm sure you're all aware, if you can count. And so in this episode I'm going to be doing something a little different than usual. So I'm going to preface this with a little bit of a story about a story. I learned how to read and write at a very young age. I was reading probably around like 2 years old or so. My parents say they never really had to teach me how to read, and I just kind of picked it up, which I don't know how, but that's what they say. So, you know, I was sort of ahead of the game at that point, in like kindergarten and those years. So I enjoyed writing chapter books, or what I thought were chapter books, and I'm just gonna read one of them, at least part of one, in this episode. So I was obsessed with Pac-Man at the time. This book was from about, like, first grade, I think. Beginning of first grade. And at the time, I was just obsessed with Pac-Man. So, I wrote a book called The Adventures of Pac-Man. Alright, so if you haven't heard of the game Pac-Man before, quick synopsis. It's a guy named Pac-Man who gets chased by ghosts in a maze and he eats dots. It's from 1980. Look up a video of it if you haven't seen it before. But, yeah, so here's chapter 1. It's called Pac-Man Looking for Dots. So, one day, Pac-Man came out of the video game looking for dots. He saw the pantry, and he saw something that said Wooka on it. No Pac-Man, it said dots. But then he opened it, but it was candy. Then Pac-Man was reading a book, and he saw a question mark, and he saw a dot. And he bit into the book, but he spat it out. And then he saw a yellow apple with the stem cut off, and then he ate it, thinking it was a dot. Chapter 2, Pac-Man Goes to School. One day, Pac-Man was going to school, and when he got there, they started learning how to count dots. Pac-Man learned how to count all the way to 20, and then they learned the alphabet. Then he went into the video game, and his score was 0, because he was counting all the dots. Chapter 3, Pac-Man on the Computer. One day, Pac-Man was on the computer, and he was looking for the game Wooka. No Pac-Man, he was looking for Pac-Man, but all he found was pinball. Then he didn't even find a game. Instead, he found something about beds. Then he just kept finding other stuff, then he found it. Chapter 4, Pac-Man in Space. One day, Pac-Man wanted to go to space. So he got his rocket and he went to space. I love how Pac-Man just has a rocket lying around. Like, why? I don't know. And then he saw the moon and a red dot. But he didn't know what it was, so he drove it closer, but it was Mars. And then he saw a big rock floating in space. 2 more, 3 more, 4 more, 100 more! But then he remembered it was an asteroid. And then he saw an orange dot with something around it. But it was Jupiter. And he saw Mars. But he knew Mars wasn't right next to Jupiter, but it was part of Jupiter. But it was also a big storm hunt on Jupiter. But he was glad he got away. And then he saw Saturn. And 3 more gray dots, but they were Saturn's moons. So he wondered if Saturn had more than 63 moons, because that's how many Jupiter has. And then he saw Uranus. I'm going to pronounce it that way. You can let me know in the comments how wrong I am. And then he saw Neptune, and he stopped there so he could take a vacation. Just saying, I had a slight obsession with the solar system in preschool, as my friend Adam Vetzer will kindly let you know. So that explains the many planet facts in this chapter. The longest chapter so far, actually. Alright, anyway, chapter 5, Pac-Man goes to the playground. One day, Pac-Man went to the playground, and first, he went on the slide. But a screw was loose, so he put a shoe on it, and when it got down, it broke the slide. Okay? And then he went on the swing, but it broke. And then he went on the seesaw with Inky. But it broke. Just saying, Inky isn't my cat. Well, Inky is my cat, but I didn't have Inky at the time of writing this. Inky is just the name of a Pac-Man ghost. And then he went on everything again, and everything worked. Chapter 6, Pac-Man Goes to the Beach. One day, Pac-Man wanted to go to the beach. So when he got to the beach, there was a fish on his head, and 1,972,342,943 seashells. Which is extremely logical, that you just, you go to the beach and just fish on your head, And then he saw some dots on the ground, so he picked some up and ate them, but then he spat them out. But it was sand, and then he made a sandcastle. with a shower and a water fountain and a Pac-Man game and a TV. And when he got out, he saw a dot to dot in the sand, so he did it. And then he drew a picture of the beach. It had seashells, water, fish, and Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man drawing a picture. Picture on page 24, which is right next to it, so I don't know why I needed to say that the picture was there, but if you want to see it, here it is. Chapter 7, Pac-Man playing his video game. One day, Pac-Man was playing his video game, and first he played Pac-Man. Wow. And he got up to level 3. And he got 9,513 points. I'd like to point out that that's not possible, because in Pac-Man you can only get points that are a multiple of 10. So I'm very disappointed in my first grade self. And then he played Pac-Man Plus. And he got to level 4, and he got 10,521 points. Similarly, it has a flaw in that. And then he played Super Pac-Man. And he got up to level 14, and he got 134,920 points. Oh, alright, you're good, you're good. And then he played Pac and Pal, and he got up to level 8, and he got 50,950 points. And then, a lot of white space, just wasting paper. He played them again. Chapter 8, Pac-Man turns into Blinky, maybe Clyde. One day, Pac-Man wanted to turn into Blinky. So he made a cocoon so he could turn into Blinky. But it took 3 weeks just for him to hatch. But he wasn't so red yet, because when they're first born, in parentheses, I don't know why it needs parentheses, they don't have they are real color yet. But when he got older, he turned orange, then red, then orange, then red, then orange, then red. Dang, he's having like a midlife crisis here. But he became a whole new person, Clinky. But when the other people saw him, they laughed and laughed because he looked silly. But then he woke up from a dream. But when he looked at himself, he was still Blinky. That means, oh, I turned into Blinky while I was sleeping. Chapter 9, Blinky goes on a train. This is just, I was really grasping for straws here, like, Blinky goes on a train? Like, that's so boring. Okay, anyway. One day, Blinky wanted to go on a train, but he only got to go in a circle. But then he went on the train tracks up a mountain, and he didn't do that before, because he didn't go on the tracks. Then the train started to go really slow, because the speed limit was 1 mile per hour. But it started raining, but it was okay, because he loves the rain. And there were puddles in the train. So he started splashing around, until he splashed out of the train. I don't know how that happens. How are you splashing around so much that you splash out of the train? I don't... But it was just a watering can and a train set outside. Can I just point something out here before I read this chapter title? Pac-Man is a video game character who can probably do practically anything. But for some reason, I found the need to write about him doing the most boring things humanly possible. So here's the name of this chapter. Chapter 10, Pac-Man finds 25 cents, or was it 35 cents? One day, Pac-Man went outside, and he found 5 cents, so he got his piggy bank so he could put it in. And then he found 10 cents and 25 cents. Then it started to rain money. And he got $51.94. And it didn't even fit in his piggy bank. Only $51.93 could fit. And then he found 1 cent. And altogether he had $52.25. So he played a game with his money, where he closed his eyes and picked a coin, and guessed what coin it was. I think all of you should try that. It's really fun. Chapter 11, Pac-Man meets Tableman. Just, I'm going to preface this with something. Before I wrote about Pac-Man, around the kindergarten days, I made up my own character called Tableman. He was basically a guy who could turn into anything. I don't know. Anyway, one day, Pac-Man saw something behind a tree. So he went over to see it, and it popped out and said, "Hi, I'm Tableman." And Pac-Man and Tableman started playing. First, they made a dot-to-dot. Then they made a Pac-Man game, and then they played golf. Then, they made a color by number, and Tableman turned into a cat while he waited. Then, they played hang, pack, and table man instead of hangman. And the word was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I know it has 34 letters, but how do we spell it? Then they made a maze, and Table Man got stuck in it, so he had to turn into something big, so he could just walk out of it. The end. So that was me at 6 years old. Hopefully you enjoyed this video to some degree. Make sure to leave a like if you did, and of course subscribe if you haven't before. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.